So the thing you brought up Richard Feynman. So there's a technique that is called the Feynman technique, but I don't think Richard Feynman had anything to do with that.
I think it was saying something about Einstein. Like Einstein said this.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's what Einstein said. Well, I mean, it's kind of like it's related. So the idea of the technique is to be able to make sure that you understand something, you teach it to someone else. And then you could, of course, that's the extra step here is teach it to someone younger, right? And that's really, I think that's related to low floor, high ceiling. So it's where they're at, right? So you guys heard that term before?
I have not, but I'm going to look at it.
Honestly, it's what I've been really like thinking about as a practitioner is that we have these techniques, we are professionals, but there are times where we're doing something where we don't even realize that someone else has done it, or there's like it's really more of a language thing, you know? Mm. So just to like, I Googled it real quick. It's just like a task that has a low floor, which means it's accessible for all students. So that means that you're kind of starting at a low level, but then you have these options to kind of high ceiling so that
I think
simple starting point, extended high levels. That's what that means. So
you can start for something that's very basic, but then it can just kind of keep growing.
Yeah. So so the floor is really just where the starting point is, and you can get more complex depending. So yeah, I'm going to compile a list here of just a few resources that we'll put on the website for this episode, just to cover what we've been talking about. So there are some articles. Mike, you might find this one interesting. So this is about low floor, high ceiling.
Oh, awesome.
But yeah, it's just interesting concept, but I'm sure like you're doing it just from what you're sounding like. It kind of sounds like you might be doing variations of it already. You just didn't have that term.
I didn't have the vocabulary.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot because I'm also thinking about particularly this episode. You know, we wanted to talk to you. That's why we were talking to you. But also when we mentioned that we were having this episode, someone else, another practitioner was like, well, are you going to cover math anxiety? Because this is something serious. And this is a need that I have clearly, right? But it's also the stuff that you've talked about is there. It's not very complex. You thought of it in very creative ways, but if we put it very simply, what you're doing, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, is that you're bringing the students into the process. It's not something that has to be taught to them. It's something that you're doing together. You have two different sort of views here. You have contextualized, which is directly related to your example of looking at house prices in Valencia County. That's very applicable. Your students could be in the process of buying houses or looking for that for the future. But then you also have something that's very fun. So it still involves them, as in thinking of the Lightspeed class and the zombie apocalypse example. It's not necessarily contextualized, but it's bringing it to a level that's accessible. So that's what, generally both of those strategies are doing. Taking something that's inaccessible, that causes fear, that students have struggled with, and just bringing it to their level and giving them choice and agency. That's what I'm hearing. I don't know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we've been talking about math anxiety over and over again already in this conversation because that is such a prevalent issue, not just for students. Everybody deals with this, or should I say almost everybody deals with this. So do you have any other classroom strategies that are specifically for helping students deal with math anxiety?
It probably has goes by another word. I call it grounding. When that anxiety starts to take hold, take a deep breath, listen to the environment around you, and then pick a problem on an exam, a test, whatever it is you're working on. Pick a problem and identify what you know about it. Let that be a guiding post, because often I find that when anxiety starts to take hold, we've seen something, at least this is what happened to me. I've seen something that I didn't quite remember immediately. And next thing I know, I'm in panic mode and everything is, I'm losing everything. So pause, breathe, find one thing that I know this, and just focus on that. And then working with that allows in the background that panic to kind of go away, but it allows, as you start to calm down, the other things that we have been practicing to start flooding back in. I had a physics instructor, again, years ago that would tell us this: if this is happening to you on a problem, identify what is the problem asking, what have I been given, what do I already know, and what do I need? And just kind of go back and forth with that. And that has worked out. That has always helped me, and it has helped some of my students. I gave a little quiz in class last week, and I could see that immediate fear in the eyes, and I let them know it's okay. This is a safe place to practice this. You're not going to get roasted here. Just calm, try to breathe, and find something you know.
I feel like that should be on a poster. Like, so kind of like keep calm and carry on, but like keep calm, find something you know.
And
I love it.
It's always helped me on math tests. So I just kind of keep bringing that in.
That is wonderful. I love that. It's just, again, very simple, but very effective, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate you bringing in your anxiety, your own anxiety. I can't help but just really appreciate that, because we're vulnerable with our students. Sometimes it can be a little much, but a lot of times it's more like, oh, right, you're not the sage with all the answers, but you're someone who has struggled like I'm struggling right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's just so vital. We're both adults here. We're learning.
We're trying to figure this out together.
Yeah, I love that. That community feel, which really is important in adult ed environments. We need to figure out a way to build community together. And generally what I've heard from ESL, that's already easy, because they're like, okay, we're all working together to learn these specific skills. But sometimes I felt like HSE can do that. And there are times where it does, but it's not as kind of blanket immediate community feel. I feel like, please, and I ask audience, please disagree with me. Please. I would love to engage people in these conversations, but absolutely. And it sounds like you build community in your classes, and that's really wonderful.
I absolutely try to, because they're going to help each other. And it's nice when they talk with one another. That's sometimes hard to do in a math class. No one wants to be wrong. We have this kind of bad experience where if we're wrong, oh my goodness, they're gonna call me out on it. This kind of vestigial thing from past math classes, and it's okay to be wrong. I let them know. You guys get a Dr. Pepper or Pepsi out of me, whatever it is. I'm gonna be wrong, and let's just explore this. And we do that in class, actually. We'll explore wrong answers. Why is it wrong? I mean, it feels like it should be right. We have this preconceived idea of what the answer should be, and then it's not. And is math lying to us? No, we had a preconceived notion that wasn't correct.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. I really like that. I mean, I wish I could remember, but there was this activity that I did back in New York that would be analyzing wrong math. So someone collected a bunch of pictures of bad math, terrible graphs, or when you're in the grocery store and something is 25% more free or something. And whoever created this activity, I can't remember now. It was just, one of those math people in New York. It was taking these pictures and talking and just making a class discussion of what is going on here? Why is this wrong? And how can we talk about why this is wrong, and how would we correct it if we even get to that point? And just moving away from maybe totally moving away from problem solving, that's going to come up, but it's more about the analysis. And I love that.
I want to see a whole bunch of those. You just reminded me of a bad math problem I read, and I gave it to the students, and they looked at me like, what are you doing? And it was a proportion problem, and it said something to the effect of, if 100 musicians can play Beethoven's Ninth in an hour, how fast should they play it if there's only 25 musicians? And I'm like, the same?
An
What are we
L
talking
or-
about? We can't do this.
Yeah, that's a bad example.
So you just reminded me of that problem. I'm going to have to bring it to class now so we can discuss that. I totally forgot about it until this moment in time.
Oh, that's funny.
That's fun. Yeah, I think that's just a great activity to just explore together. Like, you guys can tell this is terrible, but let's talk about why does this make no sense? I like that a lot. Jamie, you want to continue?
Yeah, we'll go on to the next question. So, are there any books or other resources that you have found to be helpful in your practice?
There was a book years ago, and I forget the name of it. And Nadia, you actually helped me find it just recently.
Okay, I got you. I got you there, Mike.
Oh, man.
Mathematics from the Birth of Numbers by Jan Goldberg.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to put a link, the link you found when we had this conversation in email.
Yes.
I'll put it with our resources.
It was a beautiful book. And in the foreword, I can't remember who wrote the foreword, but just talking about, experiencing math. And no one asks the listener of, we'll just go back to Beethoven's Ninth, what did you get out of this? How are you going to use this? But we do that constantly about math. How are you going to use this? And is it useful or not? When actually it's beautiful, and it tells us and shows us great stories about the world around us. I'm completely butchering what the foreword said because it's been a long time, but that really affected me. And I'm so glad you found it. This book I have right here, I love this one. It's Logic Puzzles, Put Your Reasoning Power to the Test. And it's just got these little logic puzzles that range from easy to kind of hard to really hard, but it talks about false logic, false hypothesis, and some math problems all around just working out what's going on in problems. And I'll bring those to class every once in a while. And we just have fun with logic problems. And I don't know, when I picked this one out, that's had to have been about, 10 years ago.
I used to do brain teasers every day with my students right before our math session because we had math every day for an hour and a half. And I loved doing that too. I just loved brain teasers.
It's good, and it does spark a lot of discussion, which is awesome in class.
Definitely.
So those two books, and then that magazine that I read so long ago. I wish I could find that one, but that's long since. I don't even remember. And I had it for the longest time in this office, and then we moved, and I don't know where it's at anymore.
So I had a question on that. Do you think it was called Mathematics Teacher?
That sounds about right, because it was a bunch of instructors, and they're what they do. I guess it was a magazine of best practices.
So I found this when you mentioned it. I Googled because that's what I do, and it looks like this isn't totally up to date, but there is a publication called Mathematics Teacher. And it looks like it's from the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. And just unfortunately, this is paid, but it kind of just looks like a journal of mathematics teachers to improve math instruction from grades 8 to 14.
Mm-hmm.
So
the UNM library here at UNM-Valencia. So I could see that being paid for.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I kind of want this. I hope this is the thing you're talking about. But either way, I want this publication. I don't even teach math anymore.
Covers, and I'm like, yeah, I remember that cover. So I believe you. This is twice, Nadia. You are like a wizard with finding lost things.
Right. It's almost like they were reading your mind.
I just like it. It really is like a challenge for me. Like just finding like someone's like, okay, I vaguely remember this thing, and then I'm immediately like jump on board. I'm not always good at it. I'm good at it today, but not usually. There's
this has been amazing. You've gotten 2 splinters out of my mind.
Yeah, and we'll put it on the episode notes so that if you forget again, go find this episode and you'll find it. Yeah, one of the things I just really love math, and there's so many different avenues. I really like what you said earlier about it's not just about what's on the test, but it's like, how is mathematics around us? And I feel like we kind of get lost in that sometimes of like, we have to pass a test. But I mean, I would argue about a lot of education really is like, well, what am I going to use this for? I'm like, well, education isn't a toolbox where you take out a hammer when you need it or a wrench when you need it. It's something that like gives you this foundational view of the world. And like the more you know about certain things, the more you appreciate it. So like learning about math, I'll be honest, I wasn't good at math either. Or maybe I thought I wasn't. I can't tell. I'm going to be real, because sometimes it felt like I didn't do as good as I thought. But one time I ran into this guy I went to high school with. So this was like years later, right? And I didn't recognize him or remember him, but he was one of my cousin's friends. And he was like, I sat behind you in geometry. I was like, oh, okay. And he was like, yeah. And I only passed that test passed that class because I would cheat on every test and just copy your answers. And I was like, oh, okay. So I guess maybe I'm better at math than I thought.
I did really good. And so did he because of me. That's awesome.
Well, I mean, he ended up getting like a much better job than me. So I guess really like those definitely getting paid more than me in adult education. But back to like that kind of beauty and that understanding of our world, it's, you don't need to just use things so much. It gives you a good perspective, and having those different perspectives actually helps you make different choices, can help you better understand something or have a good starting point. And it's hard to explain that to people who are in a place where they need this education to get to their next steps. And I'm not blaming them at all. Like this is real, but maybe there are ways that we can really share those moments with our students. And I think, Mike, from what you tell us, it sounds like you have those good moments with your students of just being able to appreciate mathematics.
I tell this story to my students, as I'll tell it here. I've had some really, really good math instructors, and I've had some bad ones. But I had this phenomenal math instructor in college. I won't say his name. I don't think that's important. But the math class. In the classroom, the room had, 4 walls, but there was a chalkboard on 3 of the walls. Like the whole wall was chalkboard. And he started on one side of the chalkboard, and we were going through a partial differential equation, and it went to the other opposite side. So he had to go through 3 chalkboards, and he always would stop and pause and show us how to read the problem, how things were changing, what was affecting what. And he weaved it like seriously like a narrative. Like he was just showing this story as this problem evolved. And it was amazing. And I've always tried to emulate. Like I was so enamored with that class. If I could have just majored in him and what he was teaching, it was great.
That sounds really awesome. I mean, that really is just like art.
It was, and you're not looking at. I mean, you are looking at letters and numbers, but it's not like a written that you would see like a Poe. But it was math, and it was just. I can't do it anymore than what I just said. How beautiful he weaved a story through the equations, but always explaining the whys.
Yeah, I love that. Well, we're going to just wrap up with one more question.
Okay.
And that is, what is one piece of advice that you would give to a new or struggling math instructor?
Let your students struggle a bit. Early on, I wanted to fill the silence with questions or hints to my students. I got really uncomfortable if there was long pauses, and it's okay. Let them work it out in silence for a while and get frustrated. That is perfectly okay. I have students ask me, can you show me an easier way? Or can you show me some of the shortcuts? And I'll tell them, there aren't any. There might be, but the finding those nuggets along the way is rewarding for the student. In fact, I've had students show me something that they've realized after practicing throughout the semester. They share it with their colleagues, and that helps them build their relationships in their own community. But let them work. Some of the biggest breakthroughs that students have are when they keep hitting a wall and they're forced to try other methods. Don't be afraid to question your students in doing and asking them what they're doing. Sometimes I'll have frustrated students because they're not getting the right answers. So we'll talk about it. Why isn't this working? Can you approach this problem differently? Rather than just giving them the answer, like ask them what's going on. What are you think's going on in this problem? Let students take control of the class sometimes. Sometimes there are students that have a way better way of explaining something other than I can. And hey, go for it. You can be the instructor. You've got this. And,
So, Mike, I was thinking what you just said is the term is productive struggle.
Oh, yeah. Productive struggle.
I knew you'd have a term for that, Nadia.
No, it's not mine. It's out there in the world, the teaching somewhere. But yeah, so that productive struggle. So it's kind of like, I guess if we look at, what is that? Vygotsky's theory, the zone of proximal development, right? So it's like kind of like an oval that has what can I do? And then they're like in the smallest circle, there's another circle around that is what can I do with help? And then what the bigger one is what I can't do, right? So you want to have students in a place where the work is not too easy, but the work is like kind of like I can struggle a little bit, but I can work on it. So I guess if we think of it as an equivalent, it would be like if a student is struggling with operations of fractions, right? So like maybe identifying fractions would be too easy for them, but they're working on the operations with fractions, which would be, that's their kind of productive struggle. So that's where they're learning. They're not learning something if they already know how to do it. And then something that would be way too hard would be like quadratic formula, right? That would be something that they're not productively struggling. They're just struggling and it's stressful. So as teachers, we have to figure out where that sweet spot is. And it sounds like
you don't want to just throw them out in the ocean and be like, okay, swim.
Exactly. You also brought up, you said that productive struggle. You also brought up that great technique that I don't think it probably has a name, but I don't know. You as the instructor has to be comfortable with those silences.
Yes.
You can't do that thinking and that engagement for your student. And this is a weird way to phrase it, but I always think of this from like, you guys ever watch that movie Hitch with,
oh man, it's been a long time.
Will Smith and Kevin James. So like the thing, it's been a long time and I barely remember the movie except for this one thing. Whereas Hitch, who is this romantic, this relationship expert, was like, you got to go 90-10. So like when you want to kiss your date, right? You don't lunge for the kiss. You get to a point where you get there and then you stop and then she comes the rest of the way because he's talking to Kevin James, who's a heterosexual man in this movie, right? So I know that's a weird analogy, but it always comes up for me because it's like we as the instructors, we have to bring them to a point where they have to finish the work. So we get them to a point, we're going to ask this weird question or this stuff, and then we have to shut up and don't do the thinking for them. Don't do the strategies for them or, like the extra. Get them to a point of where they're figuring it out. You just lined that out perfectly, Mike.
Oh, appreciate it. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Man, that's just, I think, such a great note to end on.
Yeah. I just want to say thank you so much for your time. You gave us such incredible insight into your work and your practice and how you think about math.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, we always wanted to talk to you, and we're so glad that we got this opportunity, especially with more content. Like we're really looking for, subject specific stuff that we want to talk to. That's stuff that people think about and they struggle with, and math especially.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Connect with Adult Ed, the NMEA podcast, is a project of the Propel Professional Learning System and is funded by the New Mexico Higher Education Department's Adult Education Division. Thank you for listening.